Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
Part one discussion on mental health within the context of gaming
Mm-hmm.
and our environment. Tonight, we're going to move to the table and talk
Yes.
about it in the context of at the table. And in a good way, a slippery slope. We could go in so many directions.
Yeah.
I don't remember if you mentioned it last week or if we mentioned it. I think we mentioned it. You mentioned it recording in another episode about the fact that you, in the past, actually were a therapist before you moved into the research arena. So you have clinical experience, and I think that's important. I'm not trying to put you on the spot because we didn't talk about any of this beforehand. And I bring that up for our listeners because I can come at it from a practical experience perspective. You have that as well as a clinical perspective. So I think that's why it is, I think, a great topic for us to talk about, especially this time of year. Now, when it comes to being at the table, there's a couple different ways you could talk about this and then interject at any point. One, as a game leader, GM, DM, how do you play, if you want to at all? How do you introduce those topics if you want to have them as part of a game, which I think can be a tough thing to do.
I would think so.
Two, as a leader, how do you deal with it if you are noticing someone is struggling? That's again another slippery slope. Three, which I think is the one that we really want to focus on, correct me, is how do you use being at the table, playing games, role playing, even reading the material as a means of therapy.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if I should, you could correct me. I don't know if the term therapy is the best word because I'm not a therapist, but how can you use it to your advantage to aid and assist your mental health? Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Man, aren't those massive questions for us to address?
And again, we aren't going to get all of this in one episode.
No.
And we have a lot of content we'll talk about in the future. Which I did the exact opposite of what I said we were going to do. I think before we recorded, and that keep it tight, right? So,
well, no, but I think that's fair, Brad. Because I mean, this, like, you and I have been talking about this in the background for better than a year. Like we wanted to do this for a while, and with the holiday season and just winter in the Northern Hemisphere upon us now, it was time to do it. It was time to do it, and. Okay, so before we jump into those questions, and man, honestly, I'm not even gonna try to help us answer most of them. I don't know that we can.
We can. I think it's worthwhile to at least.
But let's play with some of them.
Hopefully, all of you are listening. Keep them in mind. We're not, and again, I have no ability to provide clinical help. This is not the context in which we talk about it. That's not your role either. We're just going to talk about it from a practical perspective. And I think it's important, even as gamers, that we are cognizant and aware that other people might be struggling at the table.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so before we jump in, as we necessarily did last week, we do so again, just the standard disclaimer that we're doing this because we care and we think it's important and we think it's relevant, and we think many others, we know from what we see online, many others share this concern and sentiment. That said, absolutely nothing that Brad and I are talking about in this episode should be misconstrued as in any way, shape, or form constituting therapy, counseling, any kind of intervention whatsoever. We are just here again this week, as we were last week, to talk about the importance of good, positive mental health, and to recognize as part of that how hard that has become in modern society, especially courtesy of this, 30+ month pandemic. And so, man, Brad, to bring it back to your questions, I have a few initial thoughts to get us into it. A little disjointed, so forgive me. One is, well, again, yeah, I'm a licensed psychologist. I haven't practiced in years. It's been lovely. But there were things I really enjoyed about it, and there are things I miss about it. And that background for me has been invaluable because it has served me well in just interacting with people, right? You don't have to be in a therapeutic setting to be healthy, to model a more healthy interpersonal environment. And I think, you brought up leadership. I think in leadership that should be an implicit obligation for all of us in those positions, high or low, large or small, to do that. I think I've never used role playing. I think I mentioned this last week, but I've never used role playing in any kind of counseling endeavor. The closest, or maybe we talked about it offline. The closest
Mm.
I got is I once used chess. I taught someone chess as an intervention, which actually worked fairly well. And I remember using with some children in settings of child psychotherapy. This was back in the day. Very little Star Wars figures during play therapy. Like we're back in the remember the Micro Machines era where like
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
very, very late 90s of these like half-inch tall figures that sort of bent at the waist, right?
yep.
So I had a
Smaller than
bunch
Lego characters.
way smaller than Lego
Yeah.
characters, right? Um, and so I done that. We've talked with much more competent people like Dr. Megan Connell, who do this, and like you look, it's so cool. You look online and you look at Twitter, and we follow and intentionally retweet a number of clinicians and practices who are engaged in this work, but I'm not, but I don't think that diminishes the importance of what we're seeking to talk about with our friends who listen. Not just Brian and Eric, who are actually our friends,
Mhm.
although Eric just downloads it and doesn't listen. We still appreciate him for
Yeah.
doing that. Good call. But I think there are two things for us to maybe talk about in response to your questions. I think we can ask, okay, how can we use the table to help other people feel better? And I think equally we can ask, how can we use the table to feel better ourselves? And I'll turn it back over to you with this transitional thought. Play is endemic to our species. Play is endemic to the entire animal kingdom, it seems, eh, probably including fish and reptiles. I mean, we see play, and so it's wired into us, this need. And I think, for people in the modern world, certainly the Western world, who are busy trying to do this adulting thing, which isn't
Yeah.
really a gerund I've ever cared for, but I think in this regard it's relevant. If you're busy adulting, I think that modern life has a way of, I was going to say motivating, but beating the play out of you if you're not careful. And I think the potential at the gaming table is like we talked a bit about this last week, the opportunity to take on different roles and different personas, the opportunity to intentionally project your issues and frustrations onto this safe fictional environment, the opportunity to sit with friends, the opportunity to sit in a totally inclusive environment. I just think it offers a lot, and I think it's maybe more important to just talk about, well, what are the ways that it can offer people something, what are the ways it can offer us, right, not as therapy but just as an opportunity for us to feel better and help others feel better.
You bring up, I've actually now had to, for this episode especially, I haven't done it with other episodes, just kind of taking some notes um, as you're talking, just because you bring up so many different little nuggets. And just you talking about play being endemic, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we, um, I think observationally
yeah,
that it showed itself very visibly during the pandemic,
yeah. Oh man,
when
yes.
we had to isolate people who had never gamed.
They flocked.
They
Hmm.
flocked to
Yeah,
doing this over Zoom or whatever,
right.
you know, um, chat tool they use, Skype, Teams, whatever, WebEx, Google.
Yep. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and they were looking for ways, and I can't say this for everyone. I could talk about it because we talked about it because
Yeah.
this was for me. It's a means of escaping the negativity that we were dealing with,
Hmm.
and potentially for many, fear. We didn't know what we were dealing with
Yep. Yep.
during 2020.
Nope.
So I think we saw it in practical use, whether
Hmm.
people really understood it to be that way or
That's
not.
right.
So this idea, and you know, people. One of the first things I remember when we were talking in your realm of expertise and all that is this idea that air quote left brain versus right brain doesn't exist.
Right.
Analytics versus arts, that
Right.
doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
Um, I tend to be more analytical.
Hmm. Hmm.
I wasn't that way when I was younger. I matured into that.
Hmm.
So role playing,
Hmm.
is therapeutic for me because it stretches me
Yes.
out of what my traditional comfort zone is.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
can that be therapeutic for some people? I have to
Definitely.
imagine, and again, I'm all over the place. It
Mm-mm.
can also be frightening because in many cases, and I know this from practical experience, and with people I know, that it's sometimes difficult to socialize when you are um, experiencing situations of mental health stress, whatever that
Hmm.
may be.
Hmm.
I don't want to call it anything. I don't have that knowledge. So, this idea of role playing and this resurgence of it, pen and paper role playing, even if it's done like you and I are doing right now over
Hmm.
Zoom as we record, seems to be evidence of a need for us as adults
Yeah. Yeah.
to play
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Good.
to escape. I'll pause there. And
Mm. Boy, I mean, I struggle a little bit with the concept of escape, but I think you're probably right. I think that's
that's
my,
maybe not
well,
the right word,
but
but
but maybe it is. I think that's more my issue. And that's probably how I'm wired, right? I mean, you know me. My deal,
well, for
I,
you, I'll interject.
yeah,
I see it out of observation.
yeah,
I see it for you not as an escape. It's enrichment.
yeah, yeah.
You are the type of person that, um, and this is observationally for me, knowing you for 30 years. Um, it's not that you aren't spontaneous, because you can be, from these spontaneous
You can tell
verbal.
he's really trying hard on this one, but keep
Oh,
going.
I'm really trying to. I'm trying to keep it in the context. Let me rephrase that. You tend to do things that, not always, but more often than not, that enrich you in some way, in
Well, I
whether
get
it's
bored. Right,
knowledge
right.
or
I
whatever.
just, yeah.
I see this as an exercise for you in doing that. I don't see you the type of person that needs to air quote escape. I think
Yeah.
you enjoy role playing, and I
Mhm.
think you find it as a benefit and enrichment of yourself intellectually and whatever. I
And
just
I
put words
think
in your mouth. I'm
no,
sorry, but
I think you're absolutely right. And like we've talked about this, I mean, since our first episode for the both of us, I think. But I think apropos to our conversation now on mental health, part two, um, I also it just makes me happy. And I think that's
yeah.
important. And I think that's I think that's one of the big potentials of role playing, right? Whatever it is you're playing, whether it's at the physical table, whether, like you said, Brad, it's online. I mean, we know now we can have meaningful, durable, long-term relationships that make us happy, and it can be done over the aether, right? I mean, come on, it's the very end of 2022. A new year is almost upon us, and we know that works. This stuff makes me happy, and I think that is probably true. I know it's true for you, right?
Yep.
I know it's enriching for you. I know it's exciting for you, but I think it makes you happy too. And I suspect it's that mix of escapism. I suspect it's that mix of camaraderie and social support, right? There's this notion of the social buffer hypothesis. Research has told us since the 80s that people who perceive adequate social support in their lives tend to be notably more resilient to stress. Well, I mean, come on, it only takes one person, it only takes one table, if you will. And so I think this stuff can just make us feel better, or at least less poorly, if only for the hour or two, or if you listen to some people's games, 4, 5, which sounds
Mhm.
awesome. I think also to make sure that we're geeking out a little bit about mental health as well. And we left on this note last week, just to pick back up to it for a moment. I think for me, one of the things that intrigues me about the potential for role-playing games to shed light on how to be healthier mentally, psychologically, is I think sometimes looking at the dice mechanics as metaphors. And let me just give you, because we left off this way, and
Yeah.
indulge me for a sec here, because I think there is potential value in this, and no one seems to be talking about this. But let's just look at like everyday life. I mean, you and I have these conversations all the time offline, a lot the past year. But the current research, in fact, I just started reading a book today that came out, might have been updated for the paperback, but that is a year old and still had research into the very start of the pandemic, right? So really current. Well, best research that I've seen so far is, okay, we've mentioned this before, uh lifetime prevalence of depression. In other words, what's the chance, like how many people experience a diagnosable depression at some point in their lives, right?
Mhm.
1 out of 4, maybe better. Right now, lifetime prevalence of an anxiety disorder, 1 out of 3, maybe a little less. Okay. These are essentially normative experiences for being human in the modern world. Okay. So, one of the things about feeling down, feeling upset, feeling worried is, you don't know what's coming and you're clouded, right? I mean, that's what
Yeah.
this stuff does to us. And so let's take something, because we've been lately on an age kick, right? The Green Runion's modern age, and just the age uh,
System. Yeah.
system. Thanks. And so what I love about it is, okay, so let's just look at this for a sec. We have 3 dice. We have 3d6, one of which is a stunt die, right? It has a different color. It's like a wild die. Okay, we don't have to get into the weeds, but life presents us by way of the game, or by way of the game master, but we'll just say life, right? Hopefully life isn't as capricious as Brad when he's GMing.
I
But
was waiting
all
for
right,
it.
there it is. Finally, right,
Yep.
so some comeuppance, well deserved.
Yeah.
Life sets a difficulty level for whatever's in front of us, that next thing. Sometimes we can predict fairly accurately what that difficulty
Mhm.
level is, and sometimes we can't, but that difficulty level is there. And then, like with the age system, we roll our 3 dice. Now, statistically speaking, 3d6 has a mean of 10.5. Okay. And so average difficulty in life would be 10 to 11. Okay. But then you get your modifiers, right? Then you get, if you're proficient in anything, you get +2. And so education, social support, having a trusted mentor, having previous experience, maybe having a med that's helping. Now you add +2 to whatever you roll. You get the stunt die, because let's face it, sometimes you get the bear, and sometimes the bear gets you. But the more experience, the more adept, the more supports, whether they're internal and or external, you have, the more likely it is you're going to roll doubles on any 2 dice and get the stunt die bonus, right? And there's something inherently optimistic to me about that kind of mechanic, because it starts off completely statistically random.
Yep.
But when you add the modifier of proficiency, again, real life, people, places, things, experiences, and then just the fact of sometimes we just have to tell ourselves, to hell with this, it's got to get better. Sometimes you roll those doubles and you get that stunt.
Yep.
And I think that's the kind of thing. Maybe I'm beating the metaphor to death, but I think that's the kind of lesson that sitting at the table can offer us. I mean, how can you not get excited about just that, that mindset, because it works at the table. And the fact is, it can work in real life too. Sometimes we just need something to hold on to while we're looking for people to hold on to feel better.
That's actually, and we hadn't really talked about this offline. So just
No,
I'm
no.
hearing this as you're talking about it, and that absolutely is fascinating to me. I wonder, maybe I'm just posing questions rather than offering insight, but I go back to that Big Bang Theory episode where Sheldon decided he was going to just roll a d20
Yes.
and the dice was going to make all his decisions for him.
Hilarious.
Is there some sort of cathartic experience to someone, who's struggling? If you're struggling with something like depression, in many cases it's hard to make decisions. It's sometimes hard to get out of bed, it's hard to socialize.
Yeah.
That's stuff that we don't need the DSM or whatever it is to know that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty standard. That's why we have anti-anxiety, antidepressant drugs. Is there a relief or a catharsis in saying, okay, I don't necessarily have to worry about the decisions that are going on right now that aren't dice related or aren't game related? My decisions are really just based off of a dice roll.
Yeah.
And I can have fun with the simplicity of that. And whether it's a good result or a bad result, I'm still going to be able to walk away from the table. Hopefully, I will have had a good experience, whether it's positive or whether you're using throwing axes and missing them, or trying to throw torches in windows and missing. He's completely reading something, and
I'm purposely ignoring you right now. Actually,
okay,
I no, I'm with you.
He was looking at something, and he has this straight face. And
I'm completely, because I know where this is going. But go on.
Yeah, okay, but jokes aside,
sorry.
I think there's a simplicity and a way of and a means of release by just saying, okay, all these complex decisions and experiences and problems I'm having away from the table, I can put away for a while.
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
I can
That's exactly right.
I can experience the simplicity of making a choice and it being pretty cut and dried, even with the more unique systems. Even with 3D6.
Yes.
With the even with the stunt die included, there's it's such a unique and just cool dice mechanic, but there's a simplicity to it. And not that there isn't with 2D20 and others. They all have their different unique.
Right, but I think that's and like you could, I mean, this I just chose that one because I've been thinking about it for weeks, right? We've been talking about it, right?
Yeah.
But it applies to a lot of things. We could flip this around. We could take Genesis narrative dice system, which we both love, and we could say, okay, it applies the same thing. However, the Genesis narrative dice system is intentionally tuned. And I'm not sure it works as well. But maybe it does. Maybe it works better, right? The narrative dice system is statistically tuned so that you are more likely than not to be mildly successful, and you are more likely than not to have some mildly problematic challenges. Okay, in all fairness, that sounds a lot like life too.
Yeah.
Okay, let me take exception, and to play devil's advocate, because this is the venue for it. Here's the problem with Sheldon's rolling a d20.
Mm-hmm.
It makes for a good theater. I mean, come on,
it's just funny, but it's silly.
But it's silly. But I mean, here we are talking about mental health at the table through dice mechanics. So I mean, I'm not going to cast aspersion yet. It is silly, and here's why: because he rolled a d20. There were no modifiers. There was no opportunity for growth, etc. And there's always opportunity, right? No matter how much we're hurting, no matter how much we're looking, searching, seeking, we always have a say, even when we don't see it or feel it or recognize it. And the problem with rolling a single d20 is it's purely random. Of course, if we go the full like 5e system, then of course now it's not purely random. Now we have our mods
Yeah.
and all that, our experience, our friends, our family, our meds, our support, whatever it is. But look, the reality is some things in life are truly random, but many things aren't. And that's what a good dice mechanic does. And I think sometimes, when we're struggling, we have to remember that, right? That this stuff, you know, BS comes and goes, but it's
Hmm.
not always random. And there's always the opportunity. If we don't see it, then hopefully there are others who see it for us, right? Um, where you don't sit at a table alone. And I think
No.
that's right. You don't. It's great to have a solo game, but that's never going to be enough. And I think that's one of the powerful aspects of RPGs for mental health. Whether it's a duet, whether it's a tableful, whether whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Um it There are nice metaphors, and that's what they are. And so, we just wish everybody really good mental health um at and away from the table.
And again, if you find gaming
Hmm.
therapeutic, great, continue it.
Hmm.
If you're struggling, reach out to people.
Hmm.
Don't
Hmm.
isolate yourself. I know it's very easy when you are dealing with issues, anxiety, depression, or other things. I know with anxiety,
Yep.
depression, it's very easy to
Yep.
isolate yourself. That is, and everybody knows it. And it's cyclical. It's
Yeah.
hard to do, and it's very difficult. But talk to someone.
Yeah.
You know,
And
and if
and
you don't know someone to talk to, we're not. There's no therapy on Dice and Mind. That's not the point of it. But if you
mhm.
just need someone to talk to, reach out.
Reach out. That it's this is such a welcoming online community. And
Yeah.
then, like, they'll be in our show notes for this week, just like for last week. There are all kinds of other venues, right, for
Yes.
more serious issues. I would offer to transition us out of the conversation with a reminder for our listeners. I think sometimes when we are struggling, we find ourselves wondering, why the heck doesn't anybody say anything? Why aren't they reaching out? Assuming they haven't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are two factors. One of which is people are very uncomfortable sometimes, right? They don't want to overstep. But more importantly, the second factor, people often simply don't recognize when
Yeah.
someone close to them is hurting. They
And
just don't
and
recognize.
and would you argue that people who are struggling sometimes don't necessarily even realize they are?
I think you're absolutely right. And I think toward that end, we've been talking kind of through the lens of like someone who's at the table struggling. The onus on ensuring, on supporting, on promoting good mental health is even greater on everyone else at the table. I've got on my laptop. I don't remember if I sent you one of these. I've got on my laptop a sticker among several, and I get a kick out of it because every time I go to class or anywhere, it's on here. But it's one of my favorite stickers, and it's dice, right? Drawings of dice in all of the quote unquote flags, in all the sequences of different colors that are known these days, that are making the rounds. And I got it because the catchphrase is, when anyone at the table is attacked, we all roll for initiative. And I
Oh
and I love
wow.
that. And I think when it comes to mental health, if you see someone at the table or away from the table who
Mm-hmm.
might be struggling, everyone at the table needs to roll to take that initiative to support their party member, right? Look, if we learned anything from Frodo, don't split the team. Don't split the party.
I think on that note, I don't know if we could you could have I don't know if there's anything else that we could say just in the context of this episode. Everyone rolls for initiative. Um, keep an eye on the table, folks.
Mhm.
We're
And
I'm
on one
not
another.
yeah, keep an eye on the table, and what I mean by that is keep an eye on one another. And don't be afraid to reach out to them. I mean, the worst case scenario, if they're going to say, no, I'm fine, or whatever the case is, but you can't hurt by asking.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
there are worse things than feeling a little uncomfortable because you end up saying, "Sorry, it's just that I care. You matter."
yeah, exactly. Hey, we're going to have to come back to this topic again
Oh, we
at
will.
some point,
Yeah.
and it'll obviously permeate in other episodes and all that, because it's one of many important topics that we want to continue to thread through our episodes
Hmm.
at various points.
Hmm.
But moving over to the GM corner.
Yeah, let's walk over there.
Because I tend to have a real problem with tracking when we record versus when.
It's uncanny. It's at
It's
least you're
uncanny.
reliable.
I have some issue where I just cannot track it properly.
Well, and in all fairness, when we record out of sequence,
Yes,
that gets wonky for both of us.
that's when
That's
I
the
have an
issue.
issue,
Yeah.
and that's what I've done when talking about this book.
Oh, and what book are you holding, Brad?
I am holding from Modiphius. We have been waiting for this a long time.
Oh,
we talked about
since
it
August.
with
Yep.
Jim Johnson.
Yeah.
The Star Trek Adventures, Utopia Planitia, Starfleet Sourcebook.
Aww.
That's pretty much what.
Pretty much it.
When you got, I think probably within 5 minutes of you getting the shipping notice, I got mine,
Yes.
and we were both giddy.
Yeah, it is a gorgeous volume.
We've had the PDF because you got it when you ordered it. So we've obviously had the ability to look at content, which we have, but we saved.
Yeah, really held back.
We saved our opportunity
to do a
full. Yeah, yep. We saved the opportunity to do a full-on read until we had the actual palatable tome in our hands.
Yeah, and I mean we've been through this. I mean, we've talked to Jim Johnson about this. You and I have been mentioning this in 1 or 30 GM corners. Not really, but it feels like that probably. And it is like we said, like we talked about with Jim seemingly so long ago now. There are so many starships, and there are star bases, and there are shuttlecraft, and shout out to Thomas Moroni and his team at Star Trek Online, because so much of the artwork came over, and and I mean, just kind of, it's a lot of this is great canon, but still it's a thing of beauty, don't you think?
Oh yeah, and I have it in front, and I have to be careful because I have to listen to you, because I'm paging
why
through
start now?
I'm paging through the book. Well, I shouldn't be doing that while we're actually live.
But you know what? But it's a gorgeous, and like I think of what Thomas shared with us, so if you don't have the book, and you should all just pause and order it now, seriously. If you don't have the book, then every couple pages or every few pages is like a starship with like an exemplar of like a really notable one, and there's backstory, there's history, and I think back to what Thomas told us when he was on the podcast, and this is in terms of what showed up on STO, but still it translates here wonderfully, of how much thought has gone in to some of these starships, especially I think the shall we call them gray cannon starships, like just how much history, how much engineering and design, and then on top of that, like we talked about with Jim Johnson not that long ago, there's material about life in Starfleet. See, now I'm thinking I know what I have to bring upstairs after we're done recording tonight, because I think this answers a question for me. But okay, so I'm going. You talk.
No, I just having been someone who played a lot of Star Trek Online, and thanks to our recent interviews and all that, reinstalled Star Trek Online.
I'm starting to get tempted.
Yeah, and obviously it's free to play. You can earn coin and gems and so on, where you can actually buy starships, which is what I did. So no one has to put forth funds into it. It's still a lot of fun. I'm a fleet admiral, so I have, at
Oh,
least at the time, I had maxed out. I was level 65, which
oh
was
my
the
God.
max. Um, and so I will get past it. As someone who played STO a lot, it really was cool for me to see
It really
those
got your
ships.
it got your Jeffries tubes in a bundle
Oh
when you
yeah, it
saw
did.
all of this.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
did. It's just neat to be able to potentially play my Star Trek Online ships
Oh yeah.
at the table,
Hmm.
and have a whether um, you or I or someone else is GMing, being able to play on a ship that I might have used
Yeah, that's cool.
in
Yeah,
STO.
because it's a different
That
frame of
one,
mind. Yeah.
yeah, one and two. Um, I know we've talked about it in the past with guests. Um, the Starship, and I was looking for this earlier, and I'm gonna. The Starship, in effect, is one of the crew.
Oh, right. In Star Trek Adventures, the ship
Are we talking
is
about that with Aaron? I can't remember who we were talking
yes,
about this.
yes. But we've talked about it with him, with Jim, with we've talked about it. It's in a bunch of the STA material, and that's how Roddenberry had really gone about it from the very beginning with Star Trek, right? The Enterprise has always been a main character in the relevant shows.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and I think that's having this material now
Yes.
really makes me want to play because
I'm
I
there.
want to play. We can
Yes.
have away missions and
Yes.
ground campaigns. You have that in STL.
Yes.
Um, but being able to have a starship as a focal point and being able to craft and build, like we talked with Jim and others about the
Yes.
ability and the information that they give you on being able to play your own and build your
I
own.
I haven't even gotten to that yet. I mean, I haven't even read that yet. I've still been geeking out over the ships that are already provided to us. The notion of, I mean, the the ability to create your own starship, to design. I
Page
don't want to
232.
I don't want to
Do
lose
you
my
want to
job.
do you want to build a shuttle?
Do you want to build a shuttle? Okay, I'm gonna stop that. Somehow we just brought Frozen in. Um,
Yeah,
I do very badly. I want to build all these things, but I need to remain employed. And it's like I
yeah.
just don't. Of course, as we record this, my winter break just started. So,
Star
when
Trek Online only takes about 4 gig worth of space.
I was actually thinking Star Trek Adventures and
Oh, well,
building a ship.
that
Yeah.
too. But STO
Yeah.
only fuels, especially now that you see
Right.
some of those ships in. We've already been jonesing for this for a while,
Oh, big
wanting to
time.
play. We just haven't had time.
And then with
Um,
the very, very occasional teases online for season 3 of Star Trek Picard in February. There's
oh yeah,
so much ship porn that they're teasing. And they're going to go nuts on this one. So it's like, oh man, I see that, Brad. I actually being serious here for a sec. That's our timeline. That's our deadline. Like if we're going to jump
that's a
into
good point.
Star
Yeah,
Trek Adventures, we have to get a game, even if we're only doing it once in a while. And we'll talk about this offline more, but I have thoughts. But we've got to get it started up before Picard starts back.
well, here's what I'm going to do because obviously Eric has no intent. So Eric downloads but doesn't listen. Um, I think we should post out there and see if we can get one or two other people to join in. Maybe someone would volunteer to help us and GM.
Yeah,
The people we
yeah.
talk to regularly are just as busy as we
Hmm.
are.
Hmm.
But maybe there's someone out there that even if they haven't done it before and they want to experiment
Yeah.
in GMing,
Hmm.
please. Couldn't be any worse than me GMing. Um, so I think it's worth putting out there because now that
Yeah.
I really want to swear right now. Darn you!
Yeah.
Um,
Whoa.
now you've got me itching to
Yeah, and
put
we could
together.
we could and we could play a canned adventure, and I mean that in a positive sense. There, I
Oh
mean,
yeah, oh
Modifius
yeah,
is putting out so much in free or really inexpensive PDFs, and they are so good in general. I mean, they are such good collections. Um, we could just really streamline the whole
Oh,
process. Oh my God,
we're not
they're
Modiphius shills. We are Star Trek nuts.
yeah, we're Star
And
Trek shills, people.
we're
We
Star Trek
just really
shills.
really think
You
highly
know,
of what
but
Jim
and
puts out with
I
that. Yeah.
love what Modiphius and what Jim and the team have done with it.
All of them.
And
Yeah.
I say that only because the material that you can get online in PDF form is really inexpensive, and
Yeah,
there's
it's
really good mission material. We
yeah,
talked with
it's
Jim
wonderful
about
player
this
service. Yeah.
a couple episodes back about
Yeah.
writing.
Yep. Yeah.
He's given us a writing clinic in the past
Yeah.
about
Yeah. That's
producing
right.
missions and campaign material. They've in effect, they have a license with Paramount, but they've given us the tools to be creative as long as we aren't going to go out there and start charging people, and I mean any of us, to create our own content, much
That's
like you
right.
can do with D&D and all that. It is
Which is
not
cool.
a closed system.
No, very cool.
So, anyone, and that's
Okay, well,
talk myself into envy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop.
Brad and I
You
have to go now so that we can plan some gaming time. On that note, though, to bring it full circle for these past 2 weeks, I think I can speak for both of us when I say, and so for so many others, really, when I say one of the things that has always been a major appeal to Star Trek is it shows us a world that's better than the one we live in today, and one that is seemingly achievable before too much longer. And like specifically with the Utopia Planitia Starfleet sourcebook, right, and its focus on the ships and the lives in Starfleet, right? I mean, fiction aside, Starfleet is intended to represent the best ideals of humanity, and one of those is being well and feeling well and helping others to do the same.
Well said.
So
I think that's the
thanks.
Best way to wrap up.
Yep. So look, everybody, the year is about to draw to an end. We wish you really good mental health, a restful end of the year, a very happy, meaningful new year. We will see you all before too long. We just keep saying this, but as a reminder,
I was gonna say, remind people.
As a reminder, episode 82 will drop next week. Then we're taking a week off. We will be back on January 9 with one more episode of the two of us riffing on something we haven't talked about at all yet, and then we'll be back to the interviews.
Before we go, what are we going to talk about?
Well, it'll have a global perspective.
All
right. Everyone, be well, stay well. We will see you next week.